Welcome back to this week's issue of the Friday Club. This week, I'm super lucky to be interviewing Daniel Cohen of MTM and Data Driven Insights. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to see you.
We've got some really good topics to talk about today. Just before we dive in then, Daniel, are you able to tell me a bit more about your role and what you do with schools?
Yeah, certainly. So I head up the business development for MTM. So it's a cross-section of many different things I do. So introduce schools to the products that we have, walk them through how we're able to help them. But there's also quite a bit in product development. So what else can an MTM be doing in the future? Who else can MTM be partnering with to add more value to our clients? So it's been quite varied, really. I'd like to say it's just one thing, but I do everything. I even make the tea.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good skill to have. Very good skill to have. I know lots of our marketing admissions managers will find that useful. For any school that perhaps has only heard a little bit about MTM or Data Driven Insights, can you tell us more about your business and what sort of work you do with schools, Daniel?
Yeah, of course. So MTM have been established since 1984. So we've been going, 37 years now. MTM specialise within the education sector. We're a specialist market research and marketing agency. We do all the typical market research pieces, sort of surveys, non-joiners interviews, parent interviews, things along those lines. But our USP is data and demographic analysis. So who are the families that use us? Why do they use us? How big is the market we've got to aim at? What's our catchment area? Where do we find more families that are likely to want to use our school? So that's pretty much a good summary of what we do.
So I know that you're all about the importance of good data analysis then. Can you give us a quick insight into the trends that you've seen in independent schools that have stuck out for you this year?
I think it's just the continued decrease in pupil numbers. The number of pupils in independent schools has been dropping year on year as a proportion to the amount of children that are in schools. So at the moment, it's about 8.9 million children in schools within England, and only 6.4% of those go to an independent school. 10 years ago, that was at 7.2%. So it's been a continuous decline. So although there's a lot of schools out there that have bucked the trends, their role trends are very healthy. As a whole, I think the independent school market has to be quite aware that there's less families using them than there were before. So there are challenges ahead, and it's being aware of how to tackle those, really, more than anything else.
Brilliant. And I know that because of that decline, and I've seen in some of your recent articles and LinkedIn posts, Daniel, that you're very for this notion that schools should be run like businesses. And it's a really interesting topic that comes up on the Friday Club time and time again. Why do you think that business approach to student recruitment and student retention is so important for independent schools?
Well, they're fee receiving schools, so they're reliant on an income to be able to provide the education that they want for the children that go to and the families that go to the school. So they have to take that approach to running the school. It has to be treated as a business. You don't have to move away from the fact that the education and a good quality education and the pastoral care and everything that goes along with that is the main focus. And it's making sure that the parents and the children have the best possible outcomes. But if you're reliant on money coming in, then you have to ensure that you've got a certain number of pupils in each year. You've got the right teaching staff in place. Your facilities are kept as good a condition as possible. The estate is kept in as good a condition as possible. And that all needs money, it all needs an income. So just saying we are a school and it's all about education, but putting the business to one side and not treating it as a business is kind of a bit of a recipe for disaster, really, unfortunately. So you don't ever have to get away from the main purpose of what you're there for, but you need an income. And you need to make sure that it's being run efficiently and the targets are set well and the staff members are performing to their optimum and they're happy, and that all sort of falls within the realm of running a business, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. And I think the good news is that if you put data to a good use, you can really analyse and look at different areas of the school as a business and see where could our student numbers grow, where can our revenue increase. And I think that leads us on really well, Daniel, to a question I'd really like to ask you, which is, what data points do you think should a school look at when they are looking to grow student numbers?
Which ones? I mean, there's so many.
Yeah.
So you're going to be looking at inquiries, you're going to be looking at your role trends year upon year. There's so much data out there that schools have access to. Some of it's quite hard to find, some of it's easier to find than others, but always concentrate with the data that you hold within house. So you know how many pupils you have every single year, you know how that's split by year group, you know the number of inquiries you get, you know where your inquiries are coming from. You should have an understanding as to the types of families that are inquiring to you. And then it's separating those data points essentially. So, right, we know we've got 30 inquiries in June and it's been consistent every single year. And the inquiries are coming from these data sources. So you can then start to work out what your return is on each of your advertising bits for that particular month. And then you can start to focus, well, that's not working, this is working. How do we then get it up to 40 inquiries a month? How do we get up to 50 inquiries a month? Did the online open days make a difference? Are they more popular than an actual physical visit? Do we get better quality then through into the physical visits because they've had an understanding of the school before visiting the school? And it's just analyzing each of the specific parts of the marketing that you're doing and right across the board. And then it makes it much easier to set targets. It makes it much easier to decide on where your marketing spend is going to go in the future. And you can do a lot of it in-house as well. So you don't have to get an external company in to do it for you. You can do this yourself. And it's just about being strategic really more than anything else. But it is looking at all of the data points. It's not just picking one and saying we'll concentrate on that. You need a broad picture. You need to see everything that's going on.
Yeah. So schools being able to track, you know, which inquiries came from which source. And that's something that we hear lots of times, Daniel. One of the things that has been really interesting for me in reading some of your work is looking at the data from parents who ultimately decide not to attend a particular school. How do you think school marketers, school admissions managers can go about A, collecting that data and then B, analysing it to improve their student recruitment efforts in the following intake?
So collecting that data themselves can be a little bit tricky because you're asking parents quite sensitive questions as to why they don't want to join you. But you can certainly do it. You can do it once they've either rejected an offer or you've not heard back from them and they're not wanting to take it up. You can make a quick phone call and have a very nice, informal, friendly chat to find out more information. Or you could employ MTM to do it for you, and we'll do the telephone interviews and get you more complete results. In terms of the information that you need and how to use it, it's, well, where did you rank? Why did they choose you in the first instance? Why did they ultimately not choose you? Were you first, second, third choice? Did that change after they started the admissions process with you? What we're trying to find out is what their perceptions are of the school. Do they think you were too academic? Did they think you were not academic enough? Were there not enough co-curricular activities? And then once you've got enough of those answers, you can then start to see, are there any patterns? And what do we want to do about it? Are we happy as we are offering what we offer to the number of pupils and families that are coming to us? Or do we want to start adjusting our offer to be able to attract more of the families that have said no to us? What are our numbers looking like? Are they stable? Are they growing? Are they decreasing? What are our competitors doing? Are we losing to one particular school? What are they doing that's different to us? And then that might lead into like a mystery shopping exercise and things along those lines. So again, it's just analyzing those data points, and it's really getting a deeper understanding as to any business needs to do this. Why are those that can afford to use us using someone else instead? What is it that we could be doing better, or what is it that we're doing incorrectly that we can improve upon? And it's just, again, it's just a way of improving further, really being more efficient.
So you must see in your role then, Dan, lots of feedback from parents who have ultimately said, well, I did go elsewhere I did take the offer from a competing school. Are there any trends as in what parents are looking for, or what tends to be a top criteria for parents when they're looking for an independent school for their child?
So it probably depends on what lifestyle group they belong to. So each of the lifestyle groups will have different requirements or different things they're looking from an independent school. So we've worked with around about 300,000 independent school families, and we've asked them, why do they go to independent school? We've asked the ones that chose not to go to an independent school, but why have you chosen to go into the state sector? We have 800 different variables on every single household within the UK, and we've built out a profile of what is an independent school buyer. So you've got 4. You've got super streets, which are typically the most affluent financiers, sometimes described as new money, very much looking for an all-round education, high-class facilities, quite often a brand name. About 80% of their children will go to an independent school. Excuse me. Next, we've got high roads. So that's your traditional independent school buyer. So a parent, grandparent would have gone to an independent school. Children often follow suit. Quite often it's to the same school that those parents went to. Again, they're looking for that all-round nurturing experience. Academics becomes more of a focus. Probably the most likely to complain, but the least likely to leave the school. So they'll be the most vocal. Next are aspirational areas. So those are your first time buyers into the marketplace. Having not been to an independent school themselves, they're experiencing it for the first time. So they're looking for value for money. They're making sacrifices. So they're not having holidays. They're not having new cars. They're investing in their child's future. And because they're looking for value for money, they're looking for attainment. What's my child going to achieve? Where do they go on to next? Least likely to complain, most likely just to up sticks and go elsewhere. Type of family that would pay extra in house prices to move into a very small catchment area for an outstanding state school. Last but not least are low roads, and they are the most likely to require some form of assistance. So that's scholarships, bursaries, help from family members, but also the least likely to go to an independent school. And again, they're very educationally aware and are looking for achievement and attainment, essentially. Once you understand that, you can then start to look at what is the makeup of those that attend our school, what's the makeup of those within our catchment area, and then how do we tailor make our messaging to make sure it's the most appropriate for what we offer, but also to those that we want to attract. And many schools are made up of all of them. So some have a fairly even split. So how do we make sure our messaging is correct, even though we're offering different things to different people, because they're coming to us for different outcomes? And it's understanding that, really. I'm not even sure if I answered the question.
That's so interesting, because it's effectively different types of personas. And I love this idea that, you know, for some families, there will be a long-time tradition of children being educated at that school. And others will be first-time buyers of independent education, which is a potential huge growth area for the industry as a whole. And I certainly know that lots of the schools that we work with here have quite a large segment of first-generation pupils. Do you think that schools need to change their marketing plan to cater to those first-generation families who are looking at independent education for the first time?
I suppose if there's a large proportion of them in their catchment area, then it would make sense to be aware of that when you're marketing, or when they're inquiring. And you just tailor your sales pitch, for want of a better term, to most accurately reflect what they're looking for. It's just being aware, really. If you're in an area which is full of high road buyers or super streets, then you're not going to pitch yourself to the aspirational families, because it doesn't make sense. They're not as likely to use you, and they're going to be looking for something entirely different to what the majority of your clientele will be. If it's a different area where it's particularly aspirational, then by all means, be very aware that you're going to have to be focusing on the academics, focusing on the attainment, focusing on the outcomes for the child when it comes to marketing to bring those families on board. especially if you're trying to get them to move away from the state sector and to be paying fees for the first time. So yeah, it's more about just being, I suppose, being aware of what your catchment is, being aware of who actually goes to your school at the moment, and does it align with what you offer or what you've always offered, and where do you want to go in the future? What kind of school do you want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you can, of course, provide lots of this background data on these types of personas, whether they are aspirational, whether it's a super streets family. For schools that perhaps don't have much background data on the types of prospective families that surround them, what would be a really good starting point, Daniel, for them?
I think analyze who your current parents are and who the families are that use your school, and then understand why those that have inquired have chosen not to join you, because that will give you lots of answers. And there's plenty of market research that schools can do themselves, which won't cost them anything. So doing parent surveys, making sure that they always ask those that have chosen not to join, why have you chosen not to join? You might not always get answers from them. You might get very generic answers, but occasionally someone will be willing to have a good conversation with you. And it's just making sure you're staying on top of that. So doing a parent survey once a year, finding out things that you need to know as opposed to necessarily want to know. So differentiate between the two, making sure that the parents are going to be happy to respond and give you the responses that you need to be able to make decisions. So it's always just consistently communicating and analysing the responses you get from that. And that will give you a lot of information about your school. It's a relatively cost-effective thing to do because you can do it yourselves. And then you can start to make decisions based on that.
So I think that's really important, understanding who is in your local area, who could become your target market. Daniel, if there was one takeaway that you would like school marketing teams or school admissions teams to take away from our interview today, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think ultimately be strategic about what you analyze and what research you go to undertake. Not all the research available, either being paid for or doing yourself, will always be a worthwhile exercise. So make sure you have a clear understanding of what it is you're looking to achieve, and then work out, how do we get there? What do we need to do to get there? What's the correct strategy to get to that outcome? We're always available for advice. It doesn't have to lead to a project. So I'm quite happy to look through surveys or questions to parents and say, well, that's a good idea. That's not such a good idea. Or just give general advice as to what's happening with the market. There's plenty of people out there within the sector that are good sources of information, and we're one of them. So yeah, just give us a call. Brilliant. And where would a school be able to contact you, Daniel? So you can find me on LinkedIn, polluting the feed regularly. Can send me an email. It's danielc@mtmconsulting.co.uk, or all the details are on mtmconsulting.co.uk. We'll link that when this interview goes out. But I've really, really enjoyed talking with you today, Daniel. It's really insightful. And I really enjoy when we talk about different parts of data and how that impacts a school's marketing plan. So you've given me a new angle today, and I'm sure lots of our subscribers too. So massive, massive thank you for coming on. Oh, thank you. Really appreciate it. It's been great. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll talk soon.